Remember that last blunt opinion you posted on social media and probably regretted? Now picture this, having the police show up at your door to ask you about that very post. In this dystopian scenario, your online words have made you a criminal. And this scenario is already happening across the Atlantic. European countries, under the banner of combating hate and harm, have fined and even arrested people for things they've posted online. And with the European Union's new internet law, the Digital Services Act, taking effect, its effects may be felt here in America. Let's remember that across Europe, laws against hate speech or offensive communication have turned police and courts into speech police. Here's an example. In Scotland, a comedian was convicted of a hate crime for a dumb YouTube joke where he taught his pet pug to do a Nazi salute. He insisted it was satire, but a court found the video grossly offensive and fined him £800. Now he has a criminal record. It gets even weirder to think about amplifying this approach in our digital age. So the Digital Services Act, DSA, is the European Union's sweeping law to regulate online content. Officially, it aims to make the internet safer by forcing tech platforms to swiftly remove illegal material, things like hate speech, terrorist propaganda, or other banned content. It also attempts to reduce the spread of misinformation. But underneath those benign goals lies a framework that could impose Europe's restrictive speech norms on the whole world. A recent U.S. House Judiciary Committee report bluntly called the DSA an anti-speech Big Brother law, camouflaged as safety regulation, warning that it gives European regulators the ability to suppress speech globally with which they disagree. I generally agree with that assessment. Major social media companies like Facebook, YouTube, X, TikTok operate internationally. The DSA holds these companies liable if they don't remove content illegal in Europe. The catch is that the penalties are enormous, fines of up to 6% of a company's global revenue for violations. The law becomes a powerful incentive for platforms to enforce European Union rules everywhere, not just within European Union borders, to avoid accidentally running afoul of Brussels. In effect, Europe can dictate what Americans see on the internet. Here are key ways the DSA's regime could ripple into American online life. Global rule setting. EU officials have openly pressured US-based platforms to change their global content moderation to comply with European standards. If a tweet or video is banned in Europe, the platform may delete or hide it worldwide rather than risk the fine. And it can become chaotic and impractical to run several sets of speech standards internationally. Some will just elect to follow the most restrictive rule. Political speech and satire on the chopping block. Disturbingly, European enforcers aren't just targeting clear-cut illegal content, like terrorist recruiting videos. They've used the DSA to flag core political speech, controversial opinions, even humor and satire that offend European sensibilities. America has always treated speech like the Wild West. You can say just about anything short of falsely shouting fire in a theater. Europeans treat it more like a gated community. You can speak, but only after the HOA approves your jokes. Censorship by threat of ruinous fines. The DSA's massive penalties act as a big stick to enforce compliance. No social media company wants to gamble with a fine that could wipe out their profits. This creates a strong incentive for overcompliance, taking down borderline content, erring on the side of censorship, and maybe even auto-filtering certain topics entirely. How about government-backed flaggers? Under the DSA, certain organizations, mostly nonprofits, can be designated as trusted flaggers with special authority to rapidly take down content. But many of these flagger groups are funded or influenced by government agencies and have strong ideological leanings. Here's an example. In Ireland, the central bank has shown an interest in becoming an official flagger under the DSA. It doesn't plan to flag hate or child abuse, but financial scams. Well, thank goodness the Irish Central Bank is here to guide our online conversations. If they can manage memes as well as they manage the euro crisis, what could possibly go wrong? Posts that the US law would clearly protect, like political opinions, satire, controversial debates, risk being erased from the digital public square because they conflict with Europe's stricter speech codes. This is not a theoretical worry. We've already seen instances of it. In one case, EU officials pressured TikTok to remove a video posted by an American user that argued electric cars are neither ecological or economical, a viewpoint apparently unwelcome in European discourse. In another, the French police asked X to take down a tweet from a US-based account that criticized France's immigration policies after a terrorist attack. Even outside of the DSA, we've seen the zaniness of European speech suppression. Just recently, Irish comedy writer Graham Linham was met by 5 armed officers after an airport return and arrested over social media posts. Linham is an outspoken critic of transgender activism. He made a dumb joke about that and wound up a supposed criminal just for telling a bad joke. At this point, I hope you'll admit there's a real problem in trusting European sensibilities to adequately safeguard free speech. For now, Americans still enjoy the robust protection of the First Amendment. The U.S. government can't jail you for a tweet, and U.S. courts won't uphold hate speech laws that criminalize offensive viewpoints. Yet, if the Digital Services Act and its mindset take root globally, those protections could be hollowed out in practice. Your speech might remain legal, but fewer and fewer outlets will dare to host it. This creeping censorship could arrive through a few paths. Global platforms going Europe only, big social media companies might apply the most restrictive rules globally for simplicity's sake. If Europe outlaws certain speech, that speech quietly disappears from Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, for Americans as well. We could find ourselves living under a de facto European speech code online. Homegrown imitations. Perhaps more worrying, some U.S. lawmakers and states are inspired by Europe's approach. Online safety bills with broad language are popping up from California to Mississippi, seeking to restrict harmful content here in the United States. On the surface, they claim to protect children or prevent hate, but their definitions are vague. They risk empowering bureaucrats to decide what counts as harmful speech, exactly the kind of subjective standard that leads to overreach. Corporate gatekeepers. Even without new laws, U.S. tech companies themselves might import European norms voluntarily. We've seen payment processors, crowdfunding sites, and banks deplatform individuals over controversial speech or political stances. If Europe's definition of acceptable speech becomes the global standard, you could be one terms of service update away from losing your social media, your fundraising platform, or even your bank, because an algorithm flags your opinions as hate or misinformation. The culture of free speech is fragile. It relies not just on laws, but on norms, on the sense that people won't be punished for voicing unpopular ideas. Europe's experiment shows how quickly norms can shift when government starts actively policing speech. Citizens begin to self-censor. They avoid discussing sensitive yet important topics, immigration, public health mandates, religion, for fear of crossing that invisible line. The public dialogue narrows, becomes sterilized. Could this happen in the United States? Europe's emerging digital governance isn't only about social media and tweets, it's part of a broader dystopian picture where technology is used to monitor and direct citizens' behavior in the name of security or efficiency. Several developments in Europe raise the specter of an all-encompassing surveillance state, the very kind of system Americans have long feared from more authoritarian regimes. Here are 2 particularly unsettling trends: universal digital IDs and cashless society. The EU is on the verge of launching a sweeping European digital identity (EID) system. It's essentially a single digital wallet for every citizen's important documents and credentials. The EID wallet could hold your national ID card, driver's license, medical records, bank info, diplomas, everything, and work all across European countries for verification. Imagine the power such an integrated system gives authorities. European officials say use of the EID will be voluntary, at first. Critics are warning that this one ID system paves the way for unprecedented control. If every citizen's data and transactions flow through a centralized digital ID, it's a short leap to implement a central bank digital currency linked to that ID and then abolish physical cash altogether. And if authorities don't like your activities, in a cashless world, dissenters could find their digital wallets switched off with a keystroke. Free societies must ask, who holds the off switch to your digital life? What about watching your messages? Think your private chats are off limits? Think again. European lawmakers have been busily working on a proposal nicknamed chat control that would require tech companies to scan all private messages for illegal material. This includes encrypted messaging apps. These are the very ones that are supposed to keep your conversation secure from prying eyes. As it stands, the proposal calls for automated mass scanning of every message, photo, and file, with backdoor access to break encryption if needed. The goal is to catch child abuse and other crimes, but the method essentially amounts to mass surveillance of the general population. Once the system is in place, what's to stop its expansion? If they can scan for child abuse today, they could scan for hate speech or politically subversive messages tomorrow. The principle of private correspondence, like sealed letters, personal phone calls, would be a relic of the past. Every word you utter online would be potentially subject to review by an algorithm and authorities. These trends show how a society can slide into a high-tech authoritarianism almost by accident, through incremental steps, each presented as solving some urgent problem: hate speech, misinformation, child safety, fraud, or that evergreen favorite today, human trafficking. Europe's democracies are not becoming dictatorships, of course, but they are normalizing tools of control that even 1984's Big Brother would envy: omnipresent content monitoring, universal identification, and financial control mechanisms that could be weaponized at the flip of a switch. For Americans, it's a glimpse into a possible future if we're not careful. Picture a United States where your federal digital ID, linked to your driver's license, social security, bank account, vaccine records, you name it, must be scanned to do anything and can be deactivated if you offend the wrong bureaucrat. Now, recently, the Trump administration took an aggressive stance against the DSA to ensure Americans' First Amendment rights are not infringed by our friends across the ocean. Let's see what that looks like. At the start of Trump's term, he signed an executive order to review any foreign laws undermining free speech. This made it clear that foreign censorship is now an American concern. Federal Trade Commission Chairman Ferguson sent a letter to big tech in late August this year explaining that the DSA cannot be applied if it jeopardizes freedom of expression. Ferguson's message was clear: don't enforce foreign censorship dictates at the expense of Americans' rights. It also reminded big tech that complying with the DSA itself in America could itself violate American law. The Trump administration has used soft diplomacy. In July of this year, diplomats in Europe were instructed to build opposition to the DSA. Threats of tariffs against countries that disrespect free speech rights have also been floated. The Trump administration's response has been robust and multi-pronged, mixing public condemnations, legal warnings, diplomatic lobbying, and even trade threats, all aimed at one goal: ensuring that the DSA does not end up censoring Americans or forcing U.S. companies to break American principles. Whatever you may think of President Trump, it's refreshing to see a president use executive power not to restrict liberties, but to safeguard the most natural of them all: the freedom to speak one's mind. In the United States, the First Amendment makes free speech a bedrock, sacred right. In Europe, speech is increasingly treated as a privilege, conditional on not offending the powers that be. But if we complacently assume it can't happen here, we may wake up to find that de facto censorship has crept in through a technological backdoor. American officials across the political spectrum are already voicing concern about Europe's path. One Federal Communications Commission commissioner warned that the EU's internet rules are incompatible with our free speech tradition. A House report and delegation have sounded alarms that European censorship laws pose a global threat to free expression. This vigilance is a good sign, but it must translate into action. Ultimately, defending free speech and digital freedom will require conscious effort. That means holding our own leaders accountable if they try to import Europe's worst ideas. It means pressuring U.S. tech companies to stand up for American principles and not cave to foreign censors. And it means staying informed and outspoken as citizens. The trajectory in Europe shows that once rights are curtailed, the trend is to tighten the noose further, and rarely the reverse. This sort of digital dystopia is not inevitable. America can choose a different path, one that embraces the free exchange of ideas, robust debate, and individual privacy, while addressing genuine online harms in ways that are consistent with liberty. But we should make that choice with eyes wide open. What's happening in Europe right now is a cautionary tale. It shows how easily a society can slide from protecting people to policing them, from empowering citizens to monitoring and muffling them. Let's take that lesson to heart. The fight for free speech, once thought won, is back on, as it always has been and always will be, and the battleground is everywhere and nowhere at once. The servers, the smartphones, the networks that connect us all. If we don't defend the digital frontier, we risk waking up on the wrong side of a new Iron Curtain, one that doesn't just divide nations, but separates the free from the unfree. For my part, I will stand where I've always stood, in this arena, fighting for free speech as it actually is, rough, imperfect, and sometimes abrasive, but always the safeguard of every other liberty we hold dear. I'm Benjamin Barr, and I'm glad that you joined us today. I want to take a moment to have a message about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It touches me and in my life. I've met Charlie several times with client and personal events, and it signals sort of a canary in the coal mine about whether our country is still committed to the idea that we can debate one another, reason for reason, principle for principle, or whether we've given up on these Enlightenment ideas. If we've given up and we resort simply to tribal violence, then everything America stands for, that shining city on the hill, is gone. I think America lost a great deal with the passing of Charlie Kirk. I'm ashamed that we have continued to devolve into tribal violence rather than embracing debate, embracing an exchange of ideas. I think it's ever the more important for me to calmly, politely discuss free speech cases and to stand by it here and the principles that have guided this nation. So thank you for being here today. Please join us next week as we explore yet another constitutional controversy.